represents now. But going back 20 years, the modern smartphone didn't exist, nor did social media, online streaming, hybrid cars, or any of the big brands that we know today, from YouTube, Uber, Airbnb, you name it, all the big unicorns have originated in the last 20 years. It feels like progress is faster than ever. We live and breathe disruption in our everyday lives, and it's within our actual existence that we have been able to notice these things. And futurists agree, over the course of the 21st century, they're predicting alone that there's going to be 20,000 years of progress. With exponential change, we need to find a common factor that we, as innovators and as creators of the future, can understand and guide our innovation in the future that is so unknown. So we need to search for this common factor, a linchpin around which change can spin, and it can pivot and it can happen, but we can make more informed and more guided decisions. So what is that common factor? Well, we need to look back here to us, or more specifically here to our brain. Or more specifically here to our brain. Now, I have something really useful to tell you, and that is that in terms of the brain is slow to change. The neurological structure of my brain, of your brain, and everyone's brain has remained relatively constant for thousands of years, which means we found our common factor that unifies everyone that we're ever trying to innovate for and unifies us as a human species in terms of understanding and insight into what people do and why people do it. It seems like the technological era is over and the psychological era is here. We can't place money on what's going to happen in the next 5 years in terms of technological advances. We've proved that by looking at the 20 years at the start of this century. No one would have predicted the technologies that would have emerged. So how can we for the next 20 years of our careers in the future to come? We need to look at what people are doing and why, and that insight can only come from psychology. We need to bring a structured understanding to this people understanding that we all have. Like most of your jobs is by understanding people. Whether you work in marketing or the e-commerce space or in the ideation space, your job is to understand the essence of people. And as human beings, this isn't new to us. We understand people all the time. We read people, we understand people, and we make conclusions about what they're doing. If you've ever been to like a dinner party or a night out and you've got back in and you've just decompressed the night out with your partner, what someone said, what they didn't say, but what they actually said based on the way they said it or their body language, it's intuitive. We understand what people are doing and why. The innovation power, however, comes from bringing a structured understanding to this people understanding so that we can take it into our workplace and design and ideate for the common factor, which is the human brain. Now, luckily, there's an entire sector of science called behavioral science, and it's composite of these four main sectors. We've got psychology, which is the study of mind and behavior. We've got sociology, the study of social interactions and social patterns. Behavioral economics, the study of our irrationality and the mechanisms that drive our choice. And neuroscience, looking at the very structures of our brain and understanding from a neuroanatomal level how we perceive the world and how we interact with the world around us. So this is where we start to make a transition. We start to make a transition from the academic behavioral science space to where I work. I run a studio called Behaviour Studio. We're from Manchester in the UK. We believe in the power of people. We take behavioral science and we use it as an ideation tool at our studio with our clients. We work by training design teams across products all the way to service and organization, but also use it to function around looking at behavior change. As already mentioned, I'm a design psychologist, which means I studied it at university. And for the last 6 years, I've been obsessed with this question. How do we use actionable psychology to improve design? How do we go into the behavioral science space and unpick and unravel it and bring that insight into a tool and into a framework that we can use to get repeatable and reliable outcomes? So these are some of the projects, some of the companies that we've worked on over the years. One common factor that basically pulls them all together is that they're all looking at how to understand people on a deeper level. They're looking at how to use behavioral insights to create products that actually serve the people that they're designing for. The outcome of all of these projects is always behavior change. We look to always create positive behavior change at the end of our projects. Now, as I've mentioned, and as you can imagine, when you drop 4 science sectors, you're starting to hit on the vastness of knowledge. Just to understand psychology alone, if you ever walked into a library and hit the psychology section, it's just rows and rows and rows and rows of books, let alone walking into an academic institution, which is the origin of this information and this knowledge. Knowledge, it seems, is boundless. So how do we go into these spaces and grab what we need and take it into the space where we are, which is creating for people? Well, this is where people like I come in. And essentially, if you start looking at all of these sciences, you start to notice that there starts to appear patterns across the different studies and also patterns across different behaviors that sustain across things like age, gender, and culture. And the more you look, the closer you look, the more patterns you realize that start to emerge. And from these patterns, we can start to form principles of behavior. And it's these principles that are central to what we do as a behavioral design-led design studio. So what is this new sector that I'm talking about, and what is this new way of approach that I'm starting to introduce? Well, it's a thing called behavior thinking. And it's essentially the premise is this: if we can think like behavioral scientists, we can improve the way that we ideate and design for our clients, our customers, and our users. All of our lives can be improved by just understanding our base level psychology just that little bit. Imagine how much it could achieve if you apply it to your place of work and building the future. Behavior thinking draws from the premise that we are completely irrational. If you go into behavioral economics, which is the study of irrationality, you realize that about 90% of what we do, we have no base level control over. So instead of designing for how we expect people to act, which is usually the way that we're kind of putting content out now, we need to start designing for how people actually act and how people actually think. And you can only do that by using these insights from the behavioral sciences. So, I've started to talk about these principles, dropped them here and there. So let's start looking at what they actually mean. And it's all based around this. To create innovation, we need to have a laser focused on behavior. Laser being the 5 principles that I'm going to introduce to you today. They're essentially 5 core principles that we use when we're ideating and designing with our customers. We use it to diagnose, so essentially going and starting the problem in the right place based on one of these principles, and then going really deep on one of the channels to really discover what people are doing and why, based on the insights that we've drawn from behavioral science. Now, with any framework, the deeper you go, the more complex it gets. Obviously, like the more complex you hit, more academic behavioral science. But we've created this framework that we use with our clients and we give to our clients in training so that they can start thinking like a behavioral scientist without needing a master's or a PhD. We also use this to design and ideate. So we have a toolkit that I'm going to share a little bit with you at the end. And it's essentially decompressing all the principles that we have in behavioral science. And we can bring that understanding, so it means that we're making more informed design choices at the moment that we're making them with our clients. So let's look at the first one, L. First one is make it like them. People are drawn to the familiar. We know this. If something looks like someone and sounds like someone, we're just intuitively drawn for it. We feel like it's for us, and we feel like it's talking directly for us. But simply, if you're advertising to someone who's in the elderly market, you wouldn't talk to them like they were a teenager, and you wouldn't show imagery of a teenager. They just wouldn't engage with it, and they'd just switch off. Now, like them being whoever the person is at the end of your decision making. So it might be your user, it might be your customer, it might be a patient, it might be your colleague if you're doing organizational change. But have you noticed at the end it says think like them? So this is where we're starting to hit a little bit more of the behavioral science. So we've got look like them, use imagery that look like our client base. We've got sound like them, which is use the same terminology and speak to them the way that they should be spoken to. But you've got think like them. Well, what is think like them? Well, what we need to do is we need to start anticipating how our customers are thinking at the moment they're thinking, at the moment they're making a decision, so that we can intercept it and frame what we're doing in a slightly more effective way. And you can only do that by using this behavioral science insight to understand why people are thinking, what they are thinking, and when they are thinking. So Think Like Them essentially starts here at this well-known theory of behavioral science by Daniel Kahneman. He states that we have two thinking systems. One is fast and one is slow. So system one is fast. It's intuitive, it's automatic, and it's impulsive. Our system one is essentially where we make our rapid decision makings. It's all of our quick-fire judgments that we're making every single day. System two is our thoughtful, deliberate, and calculating thought system. If you've ever studied really hard or tried to do complex maths, you're well in the middle of system two. It's effortful, it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of effort for our brain to initiate system two. The thing is, we use system one significantly more than we use system two. Remember I said system two is effortful? Our brain likes to conserve energy. And so we make most of our decisions in system one because we don't want to think about every single minute little thing that we need to do and need to think about. It would just be exhausting. And in actual fact, our brain can't sustain it. You wouldn't be able to put enough calories in to consciously think about everything that you need to do and everything that you need to decide. Unfortunately, system one is prone to systematic errors. That quick-fire judgment that I talked about, that comes from a space of heuristics and cognitive biases, little shortcuts that our brain use to make that process quicker and more effective and quicker. Also, we have no conscious control over system one, which means these quick-fire shortcuts are happening without us even realizing, which means we're making errors in our decision-making at the point we're making them. Now, let's look at an example of system one. So if I asked you to fill out the rest of this word, I would not be able to guess what this word is. You'd all pull from your native language or from English or wherever it's coming from, and I just wouldn't be able to guess. Now, if I did this, it'd be green, right? Everyone else got green? Or this, grapes or grapefruit? So this is essentially called priming, and it's an associative level of drawing and kind of breaking down information in our brain. And we use the first piece of information that we're shown to kind of form a conclusion of the information later. Now, you cognitively didn't go through the process of associating every single possible word that it might have been in the color list, in the first case in color, or in the fruit list, in the second list. It just came to mind. It was just top of mind. This is the effortless, rapid response that our system one does all the time. The problem with this is every piece of communication that you've ever delivered to anyone, whether in written form or in verbal form, you are subject to priming, which means you can accidentally draw people along a different path to the one that you had intended, depending on how you're doing it. Given that system one is so prone to mistakes, how can we help people make better decisions? And in particular, in terms of medical decisions, where those decisions are literally life and death. If you're sat in the doctor's office, you're under high stress, you're under high anxiety, you're being thrown loads of terminology that you don't understand, and yet you have to make a decision on your treatment pathway there and then. But how? How can you do that when system one is active and system one is prone to all these biases and heuristics that we've already mentioned? Well, there was a study by Banbach, which essentially looked at how to do this. How do we correct for system one thinking, and how do we keep them in system two? They essentially looked at, with the DCIDA intervention design about 10 years ago now, they looked at how to remove main factors of system one thinking. Unstable values, which is essentially the positive negatives of a treatment, aren't fully explained to you. So you make a decision based on what's provided to you, and that might interfere with the values that you have at your core. Overweighing of rare events. This is prospect theory. We assume the worst. We always do. If you're giving a percentage of death at 5%, you just focus on the 5% and you feel like you're going to die. Order effects, we've talked about this, it's primacy and recency, it's whatever you're given first and last you remember, which means if a doctor's talking to you about symptoms or side effects, they're probably the ones that you're going to remember over the course of treatment. and information overload. If you're given lots of information at once, you get completely overwhelmed and you shut down and you stay in system one. And particularly if this is unclear or undirected and you're lost because they're using lots of different words, it means that you hit a sense of ambiguity, so you just won't make a decision. And you'd rather just go to the doctor, well, what do you think? And you kind of refer back to authority. Now, this kind of nudge-based system, when implemented, 25% of patients changed their treatment plan. Admittedly, the size is small. That's only 7 patients that were in the study. But this same approach has been used to epilepsy, knee surgery, and genetic disorder treatments. So it's starting to be rolled out in terms of the health space and can be rolled out in terms of the innovation and what we're trying to do in the future. OK. So next is A, make it attention grabbing. Attention is scarce, we all know this. We're always on our phones, whether it's we're watching TV and we're on our phone. It means that we are no longer just trying to be in the competition of attention of one person or another. We're now competing with multi-channel of communication that we're all putting out every single day. To make it attention-grabbing, there's a couple of points. One is make it salient. This is just the pure element of design. Make it colorful, make it stand out. This is all the creative tactics that we can apply to make something look attractive. But you've also got make it rewarding. So provide rewards to people. If you've ever sent people out a confirmation email when they've purchased something, for example, yay, well done, it's on your way, that's an element of reward. It's thanking someone for the behavior. It's thanking someone for what they've done in the past. And it's usually in relation to a value that you value in your business. Make it personalized, we'll come back to that one. Make it emotional. Emotional content hits our brain quicker than our frontal lobe can actually process it, which means emotions get into us before our cognitive, heavy, kind of rational brain can start to think about it. It's why there's a huge drive to emotional experiences, because it just connects to us on a deeper level. Make it in the moment of need. There's no point kind of trying to design for everything. Just find that one moment where they're most likely to make a decision and put all your budget and all your effort onto that one moment. It's not about making a holistic, rounded experience. It's just improving these couple of key moments to nudge people the right way. So personalization. Personalization is a huge draw for the human brain. We like to feel the human touch in everything that we do, particularly in the digital world. Where we're kind of removing the human kind of feel to everything that we're starting to do. Now, how can you increase people filling out a survey by 44%? No one wants to fill out a survey. We avoid it at all costs, especially as people that work in the marketing or business space. We want to hear what our customers think and what they want to tell us about the experiences they've had with us. Well, in one study, essentially a post-it was enough to raise returns from 33% to 70%. Just by adding a personal note. Raise it even further by adding a thank you and the initials of the person sending out the survey. Now, this survey was sent out electronically. This isn't even a physical, hand-delivered survey. And yet the returns are so big because of that human element and because we feel like it's just for us. Okay, S is make it social. We live in a very connected world. No one lives in isolation, which means that we are influenced by every single person around us. Every action we take and every decision we make at some point comes into interaction with someone else. This might be directly by someone choosing or telling us to do something, but also it might just be the unwritten rules that we all follow, social norms being one of them. Now, if you've ever want to experience social norms, go to a dinner where you have multiple different nationalities and culture and watch people trying to greet each other. Because it's just a mess. No one understands. The Spanish try to go to kiss each other's cheek. The British just stoically stick their hand out. It's what you're used to and what pulls from your culture and your groups. It basically drives the way that you act. So we essentially we act similar to people around us, whether they are the groups that we're members of or the cultures that we're from. This means that when you're trying to put out into this space, you're trying to put out into a very messy social world. And trying to break through that social experience to get to the individual is really hard. And in most cases, if you've ever tested a product or tested something in isolation in the lab or at work, and you've launched it and it's fallen flat on its face, it's because it's hit this level and something has gone awry. It might be what people are doing, it might be their social expectations, or it might be authority that other people are telling them not to do something. So tactics would be to embrace these social norms, design with them, figure them out, and kind of place your new product or new idea into what people are already doing. Embrace social influence. We already started seeing this on websites where people add little tags like, most people buy this. People don't want to make decisions when they're hard decisions to make. They'd rather know what someone else made and probably go with it. That's your system one thinking. Create authority. This is essentially having someone that is of influence in your life that changes what you do. One case would be if you're ever in the doctor's GP's office and they say, like, hey, you should drink less alcohol. And you're like, yep, certainly, 100%, definitely going to drink less alcohol. And then you go out on a Saturday night and you're with your best friend, and your best friend is like, hey, hit some tequila. And you're like, sweet, get on that. Like, depending on who you're with, changes your behavior and changes because of this sense of authority. It's the person that you listen to. So it doesn't have to be an authority figure. It can just be the person of most influence in your life. And that comes from creating a network. So figure out this network, because the person making the decision, your end customer, probably isn't your end customer in terms of the decision maker. And it's about finding that person and trying to intercept them and change how they're thinking. So let's look at how we use social norms. So Co-op Legal Services has effectively doubled the amount of charitable giving in their wills. They worked with the BIT unit in the UK, and they basically gave 3 different scripts to the call center. So when people phoned up to make a will, they were randomly allocated a script. In the first case, they were told nothing, that this is just the control condition. The second one, they were asked, would you like to leave any money to charity in your will? And the third one, they were told, many of our customers like to leave money to charity in their will. Are there any causes you're passionate about? Now, the first 2 states, on average, people donated £3,205. In the third state, it was £6,661. Now, for the cooperative are essentially an ethical consumer in the UK, and everything they do is to the benefit of community and around charity. So it fits really strongly in their business values, and that's why their customers are phoning them anyway. So just by changing the wording and using social norm messaging, you can have double the amount of impact of what you're trying to achieve, just by pulling on social norms. Okay, E, make it easy. If it's easy, people will do it. It's as simple as that. We've all experienced hurdles in our everyday life. Little hurdles that stop us doing the big things, like setting up a pension plan, all the way to the little things like that email that everyone's got that's just theirs, the little unread little tag for like a week, 2 weeks, maybe longer. We all feel these hurdles that stop us doing the things that we want to do. And it's no different when it comes to customers and users. Essentially, make it easy to start. So try and get people to start as easy as possible. This is about removing friction costs. Make it easy to do. So essentially this is usability and accessibility. The easier it is for people to do once they've started, the more likely they are to complete. And make it easy to complete. This is just goal setting and making it so that people can plan the goals they want to achieve and achieve the goal at the end of it, using a reward to tell them that they've done so. So let's look at removing friction. How do we help people switch energy providers? Anyone switched their energy provider recently? Yeah, no one does it, right? And it's ridiculous because it saves us money. And yet we're encouraged all the time to do it, but it's actually really difficult. You have to go and look at tariffs, you have to get your reader, you have to go on the internet, you have to click a few things. It's just horrifically hard. So how did a bank try and help customers do this? Well, NatWest are a bank in the UK, and they introduced a new product called Memo, which is money in, money out, and it's a money advisory app, and it pulls from open banking APIs and data analytics to kind of do budgeting and forecasting for individual users. They will prompt you when a tariff is cheaper on the market to change your energy bill. They know what your energy bill costs. They see it going out, and they'll just flag it and tell you, and at one click of a button, you can change your energy provider. Same with goal setting. You see goal setting everywhere. If you've ever looked at fitness apps or anything around learning, like Duolingo, there's always a way to kind of like set up your goals, whether it be how many steps you want to make that week, and tracks how you're doing it. It's the base level of reason why gamification works. And it helps us complete the behavior once we hit the middle bit, which is always really difficult. R, make it relevant. Essentially just put the human experience at the core of your solution. This is the entire premise of human-centered design, and it works. Whether you make it relevant to people's sense of motivation, So that's the drive and reason why they do it, but also the psychological motivation aspects, the intrinsic and extrinsic motivation types. Their needs, including their psychological needs, the goals that they're trying to achieve, these also exist outside of the goals of your product, looking at their life goals and trying to fit it into what they want to achieve globally. Their identity, who we are, changes, and it changes based on our expectations and which social group we're in. So when you're talking to people, make sure that you're talking to the right state of identity at the time, because otherwise, if you don't, it won't be relevant to them. And their perception of value. So we can use a relevant perception of value. This pulls from behavioral economics. I know time's up. I'm going to keep on going on. And it essentially says this. We like to value things depending on how we perceive as the most relatable value. So the Bank of America worked with IDEO, which is one of the core case studies of design thinking, did this. They did research and realized that their users don't write $22.71 in their checkbook. They write $23 and round it up. And realize that there's an actually massive need in banking to do this, to just get every billable pay and just round it up and then send the addition to a savings account, and that's what they did. They did that for the Bank of America. Now it's becoming commonplace across all the new smart digital banking systems. They used the value that was relevant to the user, the rounded up value, not the accurate value which was relevant to the bank. So essentially the 5 principles of design thinking are this. Make it like them, make it attention grabbing, make it social, easy, and relevant. Now, remember at the start I said how I'm driven by making actionable psychology so that you guys can start using it. Well, there's the framework, but a framework's one thing. So let's look at the actual kit that I started talking about at the start. These represent a part of our behavior kit, and these are the tools that we embed in companies when we go to work with them. These ones are around the ideation stage. I've also got a diagnostic stage. If you'd like to see me, I can share a couple more with you. Take a picture. Use it in your work and email me with how well it went. Cool. Has everyone got a picture? If not, I'll share it on social. Okay, so in conclusion, if the 21st century is exponential growth and exponential progress, then the brain is the common factor that we can use to guide innovation. For the next era, the psychological era, understanding people of what they actually do and why they do it to innovate for the future. And combine this understanding with the creativity to use behavior thinking, to have a laser focus on behavior.